Business versus emotion. Business bada ya emotion. Anyhow, this was just a random conversation I was having with myself in my head. Welcome to episode 50 of Dostcast. हमें अब 50 का जो आधा शतक या पूरे शतक हो चुका है, उसकी खुशी के अंदर एक अनाउंसमेंट. मेरी जो कोर्स है आर्ट ऑफ रीडिंग एंड राइटिंग इफेक्टिवली, उस पर हम दे रहे हैं भारी 20% का डिस्काउंट, जिसके अंदर आप कोड यूज़ करोगे 50 यानी कि FIFTY, तो आपको उस पर 20% ऑफ मिल जाएगा. आप लोगों ने मेरी राइटिंग पढ़ी है typeshare.co पे, ट्विटर पे और जगहों पे. दिस इज़ अ कोर्स मेड फॉर यू इफ़ यू वांट टू जस्ट सॉल्व योर रीडिंग एंड राइटिंग प्रॉब्लम्स फॉर एवर. रूटीन बन जाएगा, स्ट्रैटेजीज, यू नो द ट्रिक. आई एम गेटिंग टायर्ड ऑफ सेइंग द सेम थिंग. यू नो व्हाट टू डू ब्रो. 20% ऑफ जाके लो, बढ़िया अपना एंजॉय करो. Today's episode is with Natasha Malpani Oswal, who is the head of Boundless Media, a multimedia creative house that makes content for OTT platforms like Disney Hotstar Plus, on which they have their show called Brave New World. Yes, I did not read that off a teleprompter. तो काफ़ी बढ़िया conversation थी. We ended up talking about what it is like to return back to office since WFH, work from home, is getting dead by the second, at least in some parts of India. And a bunch of other cool stuff about the content space in India, the creator economy, yada yada yada. बढ़िया एकदम top अंग्रेजी conversation, मतलब new age चीज़ों के बारे में. I am sounding like a dumb host of a late night show, so I will stop speaking. Enjoy the episode in 3, 2, 1. Apart from all the other things, I think your middle name is very interesting because I was writing down Natasha Malpani Oswal podcast notes. I'm just wondering, this is an aside completely from whatever else we're going to discuss, but like, where does this middle name come from?
That's actually not, that is my original surname. So right. I was, my parents' last name is Malpani, and then I married into the Oswal family. So it's now Natasha Malpani Oswal, because I couldn't really decide, whether to take my husband's name or not. So I just kept both. But I've been teased for having this surname my whole life. So actually people don't call me Natasha, they call me Mallu.
I see. Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at most people in the US or the UK, they always have middle names, and we were suffering from a massive dearth of middle names. So I'm glad that the 21st century is, getting more men and women to start adopting middle names, even if it's their maiden names from before marriage. That's cool. I wanted to sort of start off by saying you do a lot of things. I worked at an IBM podcast for exactly 1 month, which is when I first saw you. You were doing the Boundless podcast at that time. And ever since, you've launched into OTT, content production, also posting culture and company insights on Twitter, all of those things. You wear a lot of hats, which is something I admire. To kind of start things off, what is keeping you busy nowadays? Because we just mentioned getting back to the office, getting back at the full swing of things. Are you producing any new kind of OTT content series? What is happening?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I was saying, I'm super happy to come back to the office. And I know this is a really, really unpopular thought. So sorry, everyone, but I just don't believe in work from home. I know that people are talking about the future of work and, how anyone can do anything from anywhere. But, we tested both models, and I think that works for some industries, but in the creative field, you need to be in person. I think, that vibe, the energy, the brainstorming, the connection, even the bakchodi, we were talking about, talking shit. Like, I mean, that's what gives you creative energy, right? Like, you cannot do that on Zoom. So I'm super happy to be back, and lots happening. So I run a company called Boundless Media. So we're a production house. Like you're saying, we make shows and films for OTT platforms. So we have a ton of stuff, we're developing a few shows all in the coming of age comedy space. We're actually just going to shoot a sitcom, very interesting, like very different sort of world that we're creating for this sitcom. And then we're actually also actively looking for feature film scripts, commissioning books. So lots happening on the scripting, shoot, post-production side. And of course, as you know, I also write poetry. So, trying to do that in my spare time, but that's sort of taken a backseat given how much is happening on the company side. I mean, I'm sure you're following this, right? It's a crazy time to be in content. I basically got into the digital ecosystem in 2018, right? And even at that point, it was still like very early and there were only a handful of companies in digital.
Right.
The last 3 years, I mean, the number of faces has exploded, the number of writers has exploded, the number of shows has exploded. I remember in 2018, you used to have to wait for one show to come out every few months. Now there's so many shows coming out, people can't even keep track.
Now we have a problem of choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting that we used to, when I was growing up, I would have to go to a cinema hall or essentially rent a DVD of some kind when those were still around back when, a long time ago. And now it's, you don't need company syndicated faces as actors, neither do you need company syndicated movies. It's just anyone who has an idea, has some amount of gusto and some money can essentially dive deep into the content space and find their own niche. Now, considering that you're making all of these projects with Boundless, I'm just wondering, what is the role of taste in all of that? Because like, what does your day job kind of look like? Are you consuming trends on Twitter, Netflix? Are you doing meetings with people to kind of understand what is the pulse of the OTT market?
Yeah. I mean, I think taste is honestly everything, right? Because there's no right answer. It's not like we can say when we're putting together a show that these lines of dialogues are right.
Right.
Or this scene is wrong, or actually, this type of music is the only choice that would work, right? And I find it fascinating because I actually came from a background of, I was trained in immunology, worked in cancer research, and then I was an investor before moving into production, right? So I was very much brought up, and trained at least to think there was a right answer. So it's taken me actually a while, to let go of that very structured training and thinking and, to just basically keep things free flowing and keep an open mind. So I feel like my job is a mix of, obviously developing my own taste, but also staying really open-minded. Like at no point in this industry can you get arrogant or have ego. This is one of the few industries where experience matters in terms of your network. It matters in terms of who you know, in terms of talent. It matters in terms of pattern recognition. But this is the sort of industry where a 15-year-old, can bring me an amazing script and blow me away because they don't know the rules, right? So that's the thing. You're always looking for those fresh voices, and actually sometimes people who have 20 years, like we have so many people, right, who've been trained in TV for 20 or 25 years, who come to us and actually, you can say, what's the big difference between TV and OTT? If you can write for TV, you've written TV shows that continue, why can't you write for OTT? It's not that you can't, but actually that training can sometimes get in the way of understanding a newer audience, having a fresher voice. So I always think it's a combination of having taste, but also just like listening,
like
not
what people
knowing.
call social listening.
Yeah, social listening, exactly. Not feeling like, oh, your way is the right way in such a quickly changing market. I also think it's really humbling now to be a creator or a producer or a writer or director, just to be in a creative field, because the audience has just got so smart. Now when I'm just watching a TV show for fun, I'm watching a film for fun, my husband is talking about the lighting, my friends are talking about the VFX, it's like, people are talking about production quality and scale. Like, I just don't think this was, I don't think people noticed things like this 5 or 10 years ago, so I just think now, because anyone can pick up a camera, can pick up a phone, anyone can put things on the internet, everyone's a creator, and also everyone's a critic. And also we've seen so much content now, right? So if I just feed you the same thing, you're going to laugh at me. You're instantly going to tell me, hey, this idea is from 5 years ago. So I actually think this is a great time to do spoof, parody, satire, like just taking anything
Meta
that
commentary.
we made. Yeah, just taking anything we made in the 80s or 90s and rebooting it. This is a great time.
That's how reaction channels work so well, because us time ke taste, like I just think about how singular and binary the dynamics of men and women look like of flirting and seduction look like, all of those things.
Exactly.
In fact, when Puneet was in the studio yesterday, I was talking about how, he does all these other things. I do this long form podcast. We're at the opposite ends of the spectrum of reels and podcasting. And the dynamics we used to see back in the day were like some Mr. Singhania type coming down his stairs, and his rich daughter is like, "Daddy, मैं आपकी गाड़ी लेके जा रही हूँ." And then it's just it's very caricaturish, very Bollywood Mumbai-esque. And now we have stories like we were just mentioning before the podcast. Bhuvan Bam taking his authentic style, his quotes, the way he fuses together words, and essentially making like a free series on YouTube that is at par with something cinematic that you would see on an OTT platform. And you said you had some pretty interesting insights on that. So let's dive into that.
Yeah, I think that, I actually think this is the next wave, which is what I'm saying also about, staying humble and open-minded, that creators basically, who began by either doing 15 or 20-second reels, tweeting, like you've done yourself, right? Then basically move into audio, then move into video, and basically people who become big on short form, who really understand this quick, sharp format and building an audience, are the ones who are going to get into long form and absolutely kill it. Which basically, even again, like 5 years ago, right? This is not like a 20-year-old thing. 5 years ago, there was so much snobbery between short form and long form. Right. So the thinking was, if you're in short form, if you've even done ad films, if you've done TV, there's no way you're going to be able to cross over into film or digital, right? Those are their own ecosystems. But I now think everything is going to be creator-led. So we are going to have to build shows around creators. So, this is actually something where we want to do. We want to find the next up and coming influencers, maybe Ritasha Rathore or Avanti Agrawal or Karima Barry, these, and like, Karima and Avanti and all, I think they're 20, 21, 22, right?
Yeah, I've had just Avanti on the podcast as well. Yeah.
Exactly. From scratch, just, sitting in their home in a pandemic, building this audience teaches you so much, right? About what it is the audience actually finds funny, wants to see. And you get so much more feedback that I think when you then take that and expand it into long form, you are just basically using insights that long form creators would have taken decades to actually gather. So I think we need to break down barriers and find ways, from people from the two industries to actually come together.
Right. I have a question around unlearning, because you mentioned you have a very STEM-centric background around immunology, and even I may get this wrong, but you also did an MBA from Stanford. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Right, so that's business plus.
I skipped that.
Right, business plus STEM. Of course, you must mention that I'm surprised. Like half of the reason why people enjoy what I say is because I went to Boston University, which is somehow like a status signal that works very well. I don't know why, because even a homeless man can go to Boston University and come back and write that on their bio. But for some reason, that's just the way prestige works in India. I wanted to ask, so you had this STEM-centric and business-centric education. You were not slated for a life in content or even behind the scenes in that. Now you do interviews, you lead the forefront of your team, you actively tweet about it, you're out there. What have you had to unlearn from all those days? One, you said being open-minded, like I'm assuming some kind of cutthroat corporate mentality you've had to let go of.
I think, one thing is, this whole mentality of looking for the right answer, right? Is definitely something also, because, I guess I was like a big nerd, right? In school. So it was always like to get, top marks. Right. You have to please the teachers, right? You have to answer questions in a certain way. There's always a format. And so I've really had to let go of this mindset that there's a right answer, and the mindset that you have to please people. Right, because this is an industry where there's so much uncertainty and ambiguity. The second thing, like you said, this is not of course, it's a very competitive industry, but you can't be cutthroat. Like my entire business is based on relationships.
Right.
Like it's honestly, as a producer, it's people think, oh, producers are money bags, but it's not about, it's, of course you need to have finance to make a film. You have to raise the finance. That is an aspect, but really what you have to have is you have to have great writers, right? You need to be able to create a great script. You need to be able to put together a stellar team when it comes to direction, to cast. And this industry is obviously a very small, very insular industry, right? So you have to basically be able to build relationships and trust as an outsider, because most people, of course, have either grown up in the industry or have family in the industry. So, how do you do that? How do you break in? Has been something very interesting. And then third, I think, it's very humbling, actually. I mean, I think being a producer and being in media, being a creator is actually much, much harder than being an investor or scientist. Like, I feel like, when I was in cancer research, people were like, oh, this is so fancy. You must be so smart. But actually it was super boring. It's like, you're like pipetting liquids, or like, you're like mixing different ingredients, or you're running very standardized tests. You need to, it's honestly like, it's mind-numbingly boring. It's not as sexy as people think. And then when you're an investor, it's a question of making a lot of bets, right? So again, you have to have some amount of, brains or skill to identify good companies, good teams, and back them. But people know you're taking a portfolio approach. Here, it's not like you get that many chances. So you're putting together these high value projects. I don't think people realize this, but to put together a show of film, it takes 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it's very risky. I've worked in a couple of offices in Bollywood. I know it takes a long time, and it's a gamble, because it might make it, it might not. One thing people don't often realize is how important the ROI is to the producer, because I don't know, enough people don't talk about it. It just seems like producers have this huge bucket loads of money at all times, but I've seen people put in substantial amount of their life savings into one project to make it work, which is different from kind of the iterative approach that, say, a creator like myself can do, put out mini tweets and mini videos. So it's really you assemble a lot of people around this project, hoping to see the same as you do and hoping it works. So have you had those moments where you're like, fuck, ye nahi chalne wala, or this is gonna go bust, we're gonna lose money, this is a problem? And then how have you been able to fix that?
Yeah. I think at every project, whether it's a film or show, I'll just talk about making long form fiction. In every project, the project evolves so much through that, lifespan, that what you see at a concept level versus what you see at a script level versus what you see at shoot, what you see at edit, what you see with the music, it just, it's like this, it's living, honestly. It's like a living project. It's breathing, it's mutating, it's evolving. So I think at different stages, I don't think I've ever not been scared, at least in one point of the process, right? Because you honestly, like I'm saying, you need so many things to go right. Production, firstly, is a very physical thing, right? Like, you're always running out of time, you're always running out of money. Again, I don't think people realize like how stressful shoot is. Like, people think shoot is really sexy, but from a business perspective, every day of shoot is money, right? Yes. So and it's like, when you're building a tech company or whatever, it's like, oh, put out a minimum viable product and just test it, get feedback, and then you can like iterate. You can't do that here. Like, you go on shoot one day, if your actor falls sick, your actor gets COVID, the set burns down, you lose the location, whatever happens, there's like hundreds of physical problems. That's it, right? I mean, there's so many problems that you can't predict. And you just have to constantly think on your feet, because you can't really afford, necessarily to lose shoot days, or to be able to reconvene the same cast and crew to be able to do the project another time, right? Because if you don't shoot when you're supposed to, that cast and crew is going to go off into another project. because it's a freelance industry. It's not like you have the same team. So I just think, yeah, I mean, I think on every single project I've always done, we of course have a lot of control over the development and the scripting. And that's, at Boundless, we take a lot of pride on our storytelling. So a lot of producers actually don't invest at a concept level. They come in when the script is ready, or they come in just to commission a book. We actually yeah, we start. So we're a creative house, not just a production house. So we literally started a one-page idea. We're like, okay, this is a cool concept. Now, how do we make it into an entire show of film? So we really spend that amount of time, energy, developing the story, finding the writers, putting together the writer's room, to tell that unique story that doesn't exist. So that we have a lot of control over. And I'm not saying it's easy. I actually think scripting is harder than shoot, to be honest, in the end. But you have a lot more control, right? It's a contained environment.
Right.
I mean, especially in COVID, right? Because I set up my company in January. So actually, we've only known
January?
COVID. Last January.
Yeah, before that, you just had the Boundless podcast in the book.
Yeah, I had the Boundless podcast in the book. And before that, I used to run Dice Media. I was running another production company.
Okay.
So, so this company that I'm, now at, we've only ever known lockdown, right? We've only known COVID. And of course, having the number of problems we've had with COVID, like at one point, in the second wave, we basically had just finished shoot, and then all the post-production studios shut down, right? So then we had to move our entire project online and, coordinate with people from all over the country. Like I think all producers have had to do. So, we've just learned to be very okay, with ambiguity and uncertainty.
Right. You must have a fantastic meditation ritual or some kind of a stress ball then.
I do yoga every day.
Yeah.
I literally do yoga every day. I think I've become a lot, mentally and physically stronger.
Yeah. I don't think people realize the importance of like serious physical discipline or serious meditative practice for knowledge workers, because there is the assumption that, oh, tum pura din scrolling karo, kuch idea mil gaya, kaam karo. People don't bring the same level of rigor that athletes have or high performers in business have to creative fields. And I think they're losing out. As a result, we have very forced out ideas, burnt out creatives. These problems exist karte rehti hai. So it's great that you've sort of set this out on a public forum, because most creatives, and I'm not saying all of them, but most of them, I have a slight aversion to anything that calms the mind. Instead, the tendency is to embrace more chaos, embrace more uncertainty, and do sort of I'm going to burn midnight oil, ki 2 ghante soye hain, chalo. I sort of don't like that approach. I think the idea is, if you want to sustain a career in any kind of creative field, even behind the scenes, it's very important to be mentally fit. Because, I mean, you often tweet about your team and how you sort of manage culture and stuff. I've had difficulties on the days that I'm just firing off left and right and I haven't meditated for 4 days. And there's all this pent up energy and anxiety that I then pass on to others that leads to bad decision making. So has this practice been prevalent only in this pandemic, or have you always maintained this to kind of center yourself?
I actually have a lot of things to say on this. I think it's amazing that you brought this up, because I mean, like you were saying, I think a lot about culture in the sense, I think a lot about building and managing healthy teams and healthy creatives, right? So I'm not just thinking for myself. I am also thinking about all the people I work with, which is also beyond my team, right? Because I mean, in the end, every project you work with hundreds of people.
Right.
And again, because I've shifted industries, because I also lived abroad for 10 years, right? And then came to India. So I have this like perspective on,
human rights ki thodi zyada parwah karte hain.
Yeah, exactly. I have a different perspective in terms of, how things are run in this industry, in this geography. And, honestly, when I first came to production, I was shocked, like just shocked at how unstructured it was, how messy it was, and how many mental health issues people had and have, right? And I'm not saying, of course, mental health is just an ongoing thing. You have to take care of it. Right. I'm not saying that, if you do yoga or meditation, suddenly you'll have no mental health problems, right? Like, it's like the way you take care of your physical health.
It's like that Baba Sehgal line, do yoga every day. That's his song. Huh.
Yeah. So of course, I'm not saying that you have to take care of your mental health on an ongoing basis. But exactly like you said, I feel like there's almost this pride people take in being very random and not following timelines, and almost saying, hey, I'm going to be unprofessional because I'm creative. And, I think that's like the number one thing that I really disagree with. So I literally say that, if you want to work with us, you need to be creative and practical. And not just creative, you would be creative and practical. And I actually think, you need structure, you need consistency, right? Like, what does it mean to be creative? It's a skill set, it's a muscle, you have to build it, right? So it's like,
at the end, you're also generating output, which is what most people don't think. They think that hum ideate kar rahe hain, hum creative hai. Aisa nahi hota.
See, and honestly, I say this also, which I think people don't like, that, anyone can come up with a good idea, honestly.
Right.
Anyone, like you and I, we can sit down and jam for 2 hours and we come up with, 50 great log lines. But to actually then take that one pager and make it into a book, to take that one pager and make it into a film script, to take that one pager and make it into a series, that's execution, right? It's like, how do you translate those ideas into reality? You have to have focus, you have to have consistency, exactly like you said, you have to train like an athlete, right? There's a lot of fast runners, but if you don't get up every day and you don't run,
right,
you're not gonna finish the marathon. And that's the thing with long form, it's a marathon, right? I mean, most days you're going to be rejected. Most days, like you work on 10 scripts, maybe one script actually sees the day, actually, gets picked up if you're lucky, and then by a producer. And then maybe there's a 10% chance that script actually gets made into a film, right? And then maybe there's a small chance that film does well. So you have to be very resilient. You have to keep going. You have to be good at not just making things, but also dealing with rejection and having that patience. So in fact, this is an industry where you need to be more mentally strong, not less mentally strong.
Right.
That's the first thing.
Matlab, agar aap ek tenured professor ho, you're set. You can do all your mental jogging all day. There is assurance and safety in the background.
Exactly.
That you have a tenure, right? Here it's different. So I have a question around this only. So I also have faced, when I worked with other creatives, that there is a seriously infantile notion of what creativity is. It's some kind of a joke. कुछ भी idea कर देंगे, चेप देंगे, right? जो same notes को xerox करके लगा देना, चेपने वाली mentality या फिर just get it done type की mentality. ये मैंने बहुत ज़्यादा देखी. Not at the higher levels, but certainly at the entry level, you see this a lot in everyone who calls themselves a creative. How do you give them like a solid attitude adjustment where you're like, सुनो, तुम creative अपने घर पे होगे, बहुत बढ़िया है, लेकिन अगर यहाँ काम करना है, ऐसे करना है. Like, do you get these people to get more disciplined? Do you teach them how to make a schedule? Because this is something I've had to learn. When I first went to the US for college, I was like, मैं तो creative हूँ, मेरी English अच्छी है, हो जाएगा. And then I started failing all my classes in the first year, getting really bad grades because I couldn't manage my time. I was like, okay, so you have to manage your energy, your creative energy. So when you have someone who's extremely talented, very creative, you've seen some of their work, but they're inconsistent. They're undisciplined. How do you then kind of give them that pep talk as Natasha, who runs this, house? Ki kaise karna hai wo?
See, honestly, it's like this is an ongoing thing, right? I definitely don't feel like I'm perfect at it. I think the hardest thing in the world is to, understand people, hire people, manage people. That's actually a lot harder than me myself, writing a book or running a podcast. Like it's harder to manage other creatives and be creative yourself. So I'm not saying I have the right answer. You have to adapt to each person.
Right.
So I think, it depends on seniority, right? For a lot of people, I'm learning, right? So we work with so many senior writers or directors or actors that it's more like I'm learning from them. So I'm not going to tell them, hey, this is how you have to manage your time, right?
Yeah.
It's like, they have a certain style and I have to adjust to it, right? Which is a big skill set. You have to be adaptable. But when it comes to the more junior people we work with or people we're training in-house, I mean, we just set a very specific culture. I mean, there are project plans, there are timelines. You have to be in the office. There are certain things you want to do, and if you want to do great work, there's a price to pay, right?
Yeah.
You can't. So if you, I think people who are really driven, who are genuinely motivated, you actually don't, they come in, they see the culture, they see the value add, and then they very quickly adapt. So I don't feel like, you know, I don't chase people. That's like my really, really big thing. You know, I really don't like constantly following up. I'm like, if you really want to do the work and you're intrinsically motivated, you're going to see that this works and you're going to do it.
Right.
And if you don't see that, then, you know, I mean, I'm sure there's other places that would be a better fit. So I think, you know, there's this combination. That's the thing with leadership. You have to understand what works for you,
Yeah.
and like be very authentic to that. But then you also have to adapt, you know, and tweak to each person you work with. And that middle ground is tough.
Yeah.
But I also, you know, I also have a lot of, see, I'm also creative myself, right? I also write, I also create. So I'm also not saying that structure is the answer. You know, I also do think you have to leave space for boredom. You have to leave space, you know, like we were saying, for brainstorming, for wasting time. You know, you never know where the next good idea is going to come from. So you have to manage that like structure with a lot of room for randomness, which is why you see such few creative companies. Right? Like, how many good creative companies or businesses can you name? It's so much easier to put in place very clear structure processes if you're in financial services, or if you're a tech company, but you can't. You have to leave slack if you're a creative business. And
I think that's true for creators as well. Just from my own experiences, I found that it's great to get a couple of podcasts in. It's great to just, you know, fire out production output, because I think of myself as a factory and I just think of churning out as much as I can. But that my friends who are talent managers joke about, ये साले creator हमेशा बोलते रहते हैं burnout हो रहा है. So I was like, hi, it's true, because, you know, after a while you start seeing, when you start seeing yourself as a machine that just produces stuff for the world to consume, there is that sense of you stop wasting your time, which is kind of antithetical to how you got here in the first place.
Exactly.
Because you were bored, you were fucking around, just doing random stuff, and then something came up to you. But it's so weird when you're kind of building stuff, you really don't want to waste time. I feel like just before this podcast, also, I was doing three things at once. I was trying to take a walk. I was trying to see what I was going to ask you. And I was making sure कि मेरे पैरों के नीचे घास आ रही है. So I get some of that, you know, I just feel good. But it's like, why am I doing three things at once? Why can't I just like relax and settle down? So it's like the hardest thing to do as a creative is to just, especially once you've achieved like a degree of consistency and success, is to go back to square one and see where all the ideas come from.
I think, you know, I mean, that's the thing, like, it's exactly, even I feel that pressure all the time, right? It's this constant question of, hey, am I doing enough? You know, am I moving fast enough? Am I making enough? With, hey, am I leaving enough room for spontaneity, randomness, creativity, you know, positive vibes, you know, fun, right? For myself and for everyone that I work with. So, I mean, I literally have, I struggle with this every single day. So I really don't have the answer, but at least so me and my team, we tweak the way we work, like literally every month. We just sit down and we look at it and we mess with things. So right now what we're trying is we do 3 days in office, you know, where we're much more structured, face-to-face, have all the meetings, etc., etc. And then 2 days we work from home, where everyone can just do whatever they feel like. And then no one's going to ask, you know, I mean, they know what they have to do. They're adults. Right. And then they, you know, basically like.
So what tools do you use for your managing your team? Are you using Zoom, Google Docs? Like, how do you, what softwares do you use?
So I don't really believe in having like too many fancy softwares or whatever, you know. I just believe in having people who themselves are like, you know, motivated and want to do good work. Right. I think
for the sake of understanding your workflow.
Yeah, but it's just, you know, we have Slack and we have Google Docs.
That's it.
And that's it. Because it's like, you know, I mean, what do we actually need? You know, what is it that you need? You need that, like I'm saying, it's much more a mental game.
Yeah, for sure. I see
I mean, even this mic, you know, this like fancy mic and this light and all. I actually don't have all this equipment. This is my husband's, you know.
Oh, he's a podcaster?
He runs a fintech company, but he does a lot of podcasts and conferences and webinars and
I see.
stuff. You know, so I'm almost like, hey, I really don't care about like possessions and tools and stuff. Like, I mean, you know, what you need
Keeps
is
you
your
more free.
yeah, you know, what you need is like your mind. And I actually write, you know, I like writing down things in like a physical book.
Oh, I love that. That's
Yeah.
you're one of the few who still do that. Yeah. You know, I just see a lot of startup Twitter. I get enamored, and then I just invest in a bunch of softwares and end up wasting my time.
This
Like,
is a big trend.
right. You know, it's just weird because you're like, you know, 10 no code tools that everyone should try.
Yeah.
अब ऐसा तो नहीं है ना कि there is some kind of a creative almanac for our profession. So I'm just like, okay, let's see what startup Twitter has to offer, what these tech founders have to say. And you invest in that shit, and you all your time is spent just learning. It took me, I still don't know how to properly function on Notion, and we use Notion
I was
as a
just
primary.
going to say Notion. I was just going to say Notion, Superhuman.
What is Superhuman?
A Superhuman is like a fancy email tool that's supposed to, you know, make your email a lot quicker.
Okay.
But like, that's like, I mean, why do we, you know, even I, by the way, get very, because we're both active on Twitter, right?
Right.
Even I get very enamored by tech Twitter. And they have all these, you know, solutions and like tips for building companies. But that's what I'm saying. They're building tech companies.
Right.
It is totally different to build a tech startup versus a creative business. So I have to keep reminding myself that like most of the advice doesn't apply. Yeah, it doesn't apply to us. It's not for us. It's not about, you know, build an MVP. At least for me, I mean, for you it is, you know, because you can do like 100 podcast episodes or whatever and see what works.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to do 100 films. Like, I mean, I better do one thing and do it right. So, you know, like most of the, I mean, I think we need to create like a whole social media platform just for creatives. Because, you know, like you and I are talking, where do we have these conversations? Like who's actually having conversations on building creative structure, creative business, managing building
very
creative
few.
teams?
I don't think
कोई नहीं करता है.
मेरे ख्याल से मतलब even in the thought leaders of the US or the UK, like I see a lot of people talking about relationship dynamics or mental health, or even for that matter, individual writers and filmmakers and video creators, but never kind of having well, I think in your industry, at least, there is Guneet Monga, who does fantastic work. And there are other indie production houses. Tell me, so you have all these colleagues, you're living in Mumbai. Has your experience of Mumbai changed now that you're doing this versus when you were just, I don't know, as a regular person?
So actually, you know, when I was in immunology, when I was an investor, I wasn't in India. I was in London and then California. So
what part of London were you in?
So I was in Marylebone.
I see.
So central London.
Marylebone is like right next to Kensington. Marylebone is peak Amiri district, or is that Mayfair?
That's Mayfair, but it's right next to Mayfair. It's right next to Mayfair. It's very fancy. It's definitely a fancy area. So I was in Marylebone, and then I was in Palo Alto in California, and then SF. So coming back to India, I've only ever been in production. But see, again, I'm not like, that's what I always tell people, you know, I'm not in Bollywood. Like I'm not going to, you know, these page 3 parties or whatever.
Where they write your first name in Delhi Times, like Natasha L or Natasha R.
Yeah, I'm not like a socialite, right? Like I'm not at Soho House, you know, having
lunch. Have you been to Soho House?
I have been to Soho House.
What is? I'm just curious because from what I've heard, it's a pretentious mix, but I'm curious to know, what do you think?
I mean, I find it really funny, right? Because everyone always tells me, oh, you should be hanging out at Soho House. Why are you going to office? You're wasting your time. Or like, I'm just like, dude, what am I going to? So Soho House is this very fancy building, right?
Yeah.
You know, in Juhu. And you have all these people who like dress up, to come and hang out and have lunch or dinner or just be seen. Right. And that's how you build relationships. But I always find that really funny because I mean, the way we work is, you know, if you're a writer,
Yeah.
You actually have to send us samples for us to evaluate your writing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if
You
you're
can't be seen drinking daiquiris at Soho House. That's not gonna.
you know, if you're a writer and you meet me and you say, hey, I want to work, like, what is that going to do for me? Nothing, right?
Yeah.
So I don't understand how, like, you know, I mean, of course I'll be like, we can make like, it's a great way to build relationships, but it's not really going to help me in my business. So I find it funny how people associate like networking or just being seen or visible with getting things done. And I think they're two totally different things. Like, I mean, if you want to be visible, that's great. You should be visible, but don't think that, you know, you building your follow account is going to translate, you know, into actually making something.
Politics and Samaj Seva, and that you can do in the hoods. But Vaise just being seen at these places is expensive to the wallet and does nothing. I think, I mean, early on, I'm just curious, like, because do you have like an international network of people that you sort of take advice from, get inspired from? I only spent like 10 days in Palo Alto. I was in SF with family, and then I did a solo trip when I was in my second year of college. And that place is unique. I know that now, thanks to the lockdowns, San Francisco is going to shit. People are shitting on the streets. It's just madness.
Terrible.
But would you say those years were formative in kind of like shaping your worldview now? What are some things that you think are distinctly SF, including just the perfectionistic mentality, the Teslas, anything that sort of still lives with you?
You know, so I actually think, like, I mean, I wouldn't have been in media if I had not gone to Stanford. So basically, you know what I'm saying, right? Like, I was this very like this kid who was all about like having the right answer, having structure, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I very much had this traditional view of what my career should be. And then, you know, even doing an MBA is a very traditional path, right? It's like, so I was like on a very linear path. And then I went to Silicon Valley, and, you know, it really is like, I know it's a cliche, but it's like living in the future. It is like living in the future. Like when I was there in 2016, you know, that's when people were setting up crypto funds, right? Like the crypto was hot in 2016. Now when it's become mainstream, you know, those people have obviously moved on to something else. So I just went there, you know, and they ask you these really interesting questions in the program, in the MBA program. So one question that I thought was really powerful was, you know, how did you spend your time as a kid? And then two, I thought another really powerful question was, you know, what do you like doing in your free time? And, you know, through those questions and through that introspection and just seeing what people around me were doing, I realized that, you know, you can build a business around anything that you're passionate about. You know, if you, obviously you have to be good and, you know, learn and get better.
There's also has to be like what they call product market fit. That's another word.
Product market. But you know, even with that product, you just have to have that belief first, right? Like that product market sab to baad mein aayega na. So first you just have to believe that it's even possible, right? So like, you know, people are building flying cars. I mean, who, you know, it's like people are, and it's not like, oh, people don't ask how will I get the money?
Right.
Or like, oh, I don't have any experience of building a car. It's like, you know, if you're really smart and if you're really passionate, even if you're 20 years old, people that will give you the money. They'll be like, okay, you know, go try it, fail, whatever, but at least you've learned something. And so just a completely different world. And so I was like, okay, you know, I've always been a storyteller. I've been writing since I was like a child.
Is that what you did in your free time?
Basically reading and writing, right? Like total nerd. Like all I used to, like even now, like I basically read a lot and I write a lot. And so I was like,
how do you think Twitter is as like for a writer? Is that a good medium? Because I preach it all the time. I'm just curious, like, what do you think?
I think Twitter is a great medium because obviously, you know, when I'm saying writing, I'm thinking more like fiction or long form or poetry. But I do think Twitter is amazing because it just helps you develop a certain level of consistency, right? Like coming back to what I'm saying about creation, you have to be consistent. So with Twitter, you're learning to be consistent. You're also learning to be very short and sharp. Again, you know, to what I was saying about short form creators, really understanding an audience. You have to be precise. You have to know what you're trying to say. Right. And then three, it's obviously like any social media platform, it's instant feedback, right? I mean, so, you know, like, so I've, you know, actually, I think for me, Twitter has been really helpful in understanding, you know, what people find funny, the pulse of the audience, just getting a little bit more desi,
right.
Just like adapting to what it means to work in India.
Yeah.
Like I've learned so much just from putting stuff out there, and then either seeing stuff completely tank, or people get angry, or people loving it, or whatever. And that's actually then helped me adjust my style, not just in terms of what content I'm making, but also in the way I'm working with people, right? So I'll give you one really silly example. Like abroad, people pretend they don't have a family. So you will never tell, like, people will never say, oh, I have to take time off because I have to go for a wedding, or my grandmother is sick, or that, I have to go home early because my child needs something. They just act like they have no family, and they make everything work around work.
Right.
In India, obviously, it's the opposite, right? It's like family is first and then work is second.
Yeah.
So people are continuously, having to adjust around their personal life. So that was like a huge shock to me, and I think like through Twitter, I sort of realized like how important that is. And, you can't take a strong stance about that. You have to let people, you know, make sure that they prioritize their family and then adjust work around that.
Right. I got shit on for not being here for Diwali. So I had actually came back earlier because no one could actually understand or enjoy or appreciate the fact कि यार ये आदमी मेहनत कर रहा है इसलिए अभी कहीं दूर गया हुआ है अरे दिवाली कैसे मिस कर रही है ये क्या हो गया तो it's you're right it's the community sort of comes first and that's also an advantage. You have all these terrific geniuses from different companies, Zomato, Swiggy, ye wo, but then they post stuff like the Son Papadi hits differently, and that's something that's so Indian. Despite all your prowess and your technical skills, there's that very Indianness that I also love on Twitter that comes out, that is refreshing from some of the value just dete rehte hain na ki like making very value centric tweets around if you wake up early in the morning gets everything okay, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And that's what now, like, we have to, I also feel like sometimes you this younger generation sometimes acts like we're abroad, but we're not abroad, right? It's like, I mean, we can talk in English, or we can, act like, we're our lifestyle and work is like I don't know, like we're so liberal and open-minded or whatever.
अच्छा लगता है सुजेट पे जाके avocado toast खाने में, लेकिन घर पे सब लोग तोरई खाते हैं, तो वो तो difference.
So you have to understand, that in the end you have to localize everything.
Right. How so I'm sure jab when you were working and especially with writers, you get submissions from say tier 2, tier 3 cities that people haven't heard of, and what is that experience like? Because एक तो होता है like a Mumbai centric writer, especially if he or she's been living there for a while, will sort of get used to the industry के तरीके क्या है, how to pitch certain ideas, right? But then you get like people from say Muzaffarnagar or like somewhere else. What is that experience like, communicating with people who are just absolutely in vernacular India?
तो हम अभी in fact we do that only more because I'll tell you, see, this whole OTT trend, right? It used to, first Netflix had this very urban voice, right? They made stuff like Love Per Square Foot. And now every platform, including Netflix, is moving to much more desi content, much more locally rooted content. They want to see stuff set in tier 2, tier 3 cities. They want to explore different cultures in India. They want to see stuff set in Lucknow or Varanasi. And even if you take a simple college romance or dating story, if you set it in Bangalore versus Varanasi, that entire story is going to change. Right. So we have to tell stories. It's not like, when we used to first, I don't know, like in the 90s, 2000s, I feel like the whole trend was to make films that were set abroad, right? It was like, oh, let's like go to London and party. And then you lose that like local flavor. Now it's the opposite. It's like, let's really understand a certain region's dialect, food, the way they relate to each other, the generation gap, and then build a very authentic world. Content is getting a lot more raw and relatable. So even on my team, even the writers we work with, we actively look for people now who are not from Bombay, because industry's been in Bombay, right? So many Bombay stories to get told. We have to move beyond Mumbai and Bangalore and Delhi and like go to those smaller towns and places. So not only do we look for writers who come from that background,
right?
We actually now, when we're writing a show or a film, we go spend time there.
Okay, interesting.
We go.
Even you?
Yeah.
I mean, how actively involved are you in a creative project? In the, say, the actual execution?
I mean, I have no choice, right? Like, I have to be.
No, I mean, as a producer, like in like कि मैं ये idea देती हूँ, ऐसा idea करते हैं, in that sense.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm actively involved in, every stage of the scripting, from idea to story, characters, world, screenplay. Obviously it's a collaborative process. It is the writer's vision, but we need to have, that final sign off. Right. Along with the platform.
Do writers hate you for that? कि जैसे हमारा idea ऐसे कर दिया, थोड़ा chop कर दिया.
I think any practical writer now knows, that you have to shape stories with the producer on the platform. I mean, people are what I think what new writers don't understand is that writing. I mean, not just in industry, I think in general is about rewriting, right?
Right.
So it's not like you come and you pitch an idea and it gets made. I mean, there's so many rounds of feedback. There is a writer, actually, you need to be more skilled at listening to and taking feedback, and also knowing what to take and not take. Because I give you 10 ideas, maybe 2 will be good. 2 will not work for the character that, you envisioned.
Right.
He might be wrong in terms of the world if you understand it better than me. So you have to also be able to know, like, okay, this is great. You have to be humble enough to be like, okay, this is great. And you also have to be strong enough to be able to push back and say, hey, this doesn't work for this reason. So actually what I've learned is that listening and taking on feedback is a much more senior skill than writing.
Yeah. हमारे देश के अंदर ये दिक्कत तो है. Several of us are just first draft writers. बस उसके आगे मत कराओ.
Yeah, and that's where that's to answer your original question. That's the difference. I find a lot of talent. That's what I love, finding fresh voices, fresh writers. So it's not about the ideas. It's the polish, the rewriting. Is where you really have to work with people, and attitude, right? Like, I think that's the thing with corporate India. People need a lot of training in terms of their attitude and approach to work.
Any incidents that you can point out where you found that people's attitude is off when it comes to, working?
Yeah, I have hundreds. I mean, we work with so many people, right? So I mean, every day, like, just yesterday, I had a really, really junior writer quote like a absolutely ridiculous sum of money, for a project. And then, we frankly told him, because we want to help him, that, hey, this is market rate or whatever. And then he just got really offended, because we weren't seeing his genius. And it's like, I mean, most, like most producers won't even tell you, right? They'll just ignore you. They'll be like, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. So
ये नहीं बोला कि चलो मैं तो बाहर पढ़ी हुई हूँ, मैं थोड़ी सोफिस्टिकेटेड हूँ, और लोग तो आपको सीधा बोलते भागो यहाँ से. क्योंकि ये भी तो फर्क होता है. Like you're telling them with kindness कि देखो, this is just impractical. You're doing the nice thing. Like mostly people will be cutthroat and just cut you off, and then also tell other people कि ऐसा कर रहा है.
Yeah. So that's what. So like, I think I always find that really funny. And then one more funny thing that I find is that, a lot of writers, again, you see this more junior writers, they have very foreign references, so they all want to make the next Tarantino film, or they want to be the next, they want to make the next Amélie or Chocolat or whatever, and these are the guys coming from tier 2, tier 3 towns. And it's like, no, you're telling a really desi story, right? Your characters are desi, your world is desi. So you come up with something unique, right? Like, why? I mean, even Tarantino is not the next Tarantino, or Tarantino is not the next Scorsese, right? Like, abroad, people find very unique voices. So when you see what directors are making, writers are making, you can see that they have a certain style. I find this that, we have such a copycat culture or mentality, right, in our work, that even in a creative field, you're copycat. And of course, we fetishize America. So all our references are, Western, and also very unachievable, right? Like, where are our local styles? We need to direct our films with a voice that works for us.
Right. अब तो बंद कर दो Friends देखना. मतलब that's a 90s sitcom rundown that is still like a status signal for us. कि हम Friends देखते हैं.
Yeah. Nee, now, so in creative, see, everyone wants to make the next Fleabag.
Yeah. What is that? Fleabag?
So Fleabag is a very, very popular Amazon show written by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. You know, like, see, that's what I'm saying. Creatives have their own little, snobbiness. So it's like, okay, if the masses are watching Friends, then they're watching Fleabag and they want to make Fleabag. So Phoebe Waller-Bridge is a writer, director, and actor, and a producer. So she has a very unique voice. And because she's part of every process, she's behind the camera, she's in front of the camera, you know, she gets to have a very, very, very specific way of telling her story. Right. So now to say, hey, you want to make the next Fleabag, you know, it's like, but you're not going to be Phoebe Waller-Bridge, right? And if you're not going to be a writer, director, actor, and producer, then you're probably not going to have that same consistency of style.
Right.
So I just find that funny how many people, you know, say that they want to do this. So I'm just saying that we need to say that, hey, you know, this is my style. This is what works for me. And this is why I want to do. That's what I want to see in terms of like a fresh voice.
Even Martin Scorsese, if you really think about him, he's a top tier vernacular creator. He's Italian American. So all he's done is tell Italian American stories, right?
Exactly.
It's like saying, you know, if you are born in a specific caste or a specific category, or your region is very interesting, and you just tell that story, and somehow by hook or crook that story becomes national, then you enter mainstream culture. So you can never say that like Martin Scorsese probably never set out to say that I'm going to make films for all of America. He's like, मेरा तो ये बचपन रहा है, मैंने ऐसे माफिया के लोग देखे हैं. I've seen Catholic guilt in them, कि you know, you're out there murdering people, but then you also have a weird relationship with Jesus. I've seen what the Cosa Nostra जो code होता है माफिया का, what that looks like. So I'm going to make films like that, and for some reason that worked.
Exactly, that's perfect. That's exactly the right, you know, example, right? That you just have to do what you know. I mean, you're going to be excellent, you know, when you tell a story you understand.
Right. Just say, I mean, if we talk about Satya or Gangs of Wasseypur, I love those films. I've watched Gangs of Wasseypur over 200 times. It's very interesting because Zishan Kadri, the guy who wrote it with Anurag Kashyap, he lived in Wasseypur. That was his life, and he came and said, "Kya ye kahani batate hain." So much so that, you know, people living in Delhi, Mumbai were like, we are seeing something real. Now, if they set out to make like a Bollywood gang film, which is why I think Mirzapur sort of like doesn't really do justice to the whole UP thing, because I have several relatives from UP, and I think it's pretty caricaturized. But if they set out to say, let's make something that pleases everyone, they would please no one.
Exactly. And that, I mean, I think, you know, we were talking about a lot of challenges for creators, but that is such a huge challenge now, right? For all creators, because I mean, you obviously want to do stuff that works, but I mean, even, you know, when I set out, like, I was like, oh, I want to make, you know, I want to tell global stories because I have a global background, you know, and then I realized that that's such a silly way to think. Actually, you need to tell very local stories. And, you know, once you find your niche, if it does well in that niche, it will do well globally. So you have to think the opposite. So let's think about, you know, the stories that have done well, right? So whether it's, you know, like what Indian shows or films have traveled globally. Made in Heaven. You know,
right.
Made in Heaven is actually a very local story, right? Like it's a very fancy
high society Delhi
story, and it makes sense, you know, for the creators to have told a high society story because they come from a high society background, and you know, they could easily have said, oh, let's make it like, you know, more accessible, more relatable, more massy, but they didn't. And because they stayed true to that world, you know, I think that's one of the shows that's the most popular abroad.
True that.
Right. So I just think that you have to not say, oh, how do I appeal to the most people, or how do I dumb it down, or how do I make it accessible?
Yeah, this dumbing down is a real problem because I often think about not only just movies, but also writing. Now, if, for example, Khushwant Singh, I don't know if you've read him, but he's a very famous writer. He died at the age of 99. He was born to a rich family, lived in Lutyens, Delhi all his life. So all his life was around, you know, writing, drinking whiskey with politicians, being in those nice Connaught Place bungalows. Uski zindagi thi. If he tried to pander and say, let me be a bit Gandhian It would just completely, be dismantled.
Yeah.
But for several people living in and around Delhi, he painted a picture of, oh, this is what high society Delhi, old money looks like. And he did
Exactly.
it honestly, without any guilt. So I mean, I don't know if you face this, but is there like a guilt conscience, or almost like a kind of pandering too much to be vernacular in the stories that you've encountered in the OTT platforms? Like, do writers deliberately come and say कि यार इसको थोड़ा और ज़्यादा ना rustic और थोड़ा गरीब बनाते हैं ताकि लगे कि यार हाँ एकदम इंडिया है?
So, I mean, that is actually, yeah, that's something even we're working on, Like, yeah, how do you not pander, right? Because see, coming from Bombay, it's so easy to say if you're setting a show in Lucknow or Varanasi, oh, let's make these, let's make these kids, suppose we're setting a coming of age story in Varanasi, either, oh, let's make them a little more innocent, or, let's make them a little more unexposed, or let's make them, a little more listening to their parents. But that's such a stereotype, right? That's like us just honestly being assholes, thinking that, oh, these people are less exposed. But why would they be less exposed? I mean, in some ways, and this is what we've realized when we go do the research, they're actually much bolder and they get away with a lot more. Because, for example, they have bigger houses. So they have more entrances.
Right. This is a whole debate. For some reason, people are like, Delhi people and like all of North India has bigger houses, and Mumbai just can't wrap their heads around that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like a shock that you're like, oh, actually, you can get away with like getting out of the house, sneaking out and, dating people or having people over more than you can in Bombay, because like in Bombay, space is such an issue. So, it's these funny small things that, we try to be aware of, but we keep falling into this trap, right? Because I mean, we know what we know. So that's why it's just important. Like you're saying, you have to work with as many diverse people, right? The second you start working with the same type of people, you only work with people who are like you, your worldview gets narrow.
Yeah. It's a good echo chamber to exist in, but it does not provide any growth.
Yeah, it doesn't provide any growth. So that's what we just have to keep looking, for that, and just, not feeling like we understand, or, we are more progressive or whatever.
Right. Natasha, are there any films or series or even shows that you are currently watching, not only for research purposes, but in general, that you think are fantastic and that have come out of India that you would like to share with listeners?
Yeah, so I'll answer the India question in 1 second.
Okay.
But shows that I'm also watching and that I just have to do a call out for because I'm so obsessed with them is right now Succession and The White Lotus. So
Succession is one show, and then White Lotus.
Succession is one show. White Lotus is another show. Both shows are not so popular in India. You can find them.
Are they on Netflix?
They're on Disney Plus Hotstar.
Okay.
They're basically made by HBO. So
HBO makes great shows. They make a few shows, but they make great shows.
HBO is just a completely different type of quality. I mean, if you ask me, like I want Boundless, to be like an HBO voice. More than just very, very, we want to make a few things. I don't want to make 100 things. I want to make a few things, but I want them to be really excellent or stand out, over time, obviously.
Like Game of Thrones, Vinyl, they made Boardwalk Empire, a bunch of others.
Yeah. So HBO that's what, I mean, I think they can be excellent because they focus on quality over quantity.
Right.
So, Succession, for, like we're talking about, laughing at privilege, right? It is a hilarious, super sarcastic, super smart take on this unbelievably wealthy, like not millionaire, billionaire wealthy media empire family.
Right.
That's fighting over who gets to succeed their father. And it's told in such a unique way. The way the characters speak, the way they relate to each other. They're a very toxic family, so they break all the rules, for example. So, you're always told, hey, if you're making a series, make likable characters. Because people have to want to watch them. Now, all these characters are absolutely unlikable. There's not one character you want to root for. But that's almost...
You don't even want to root for them. That's how bad they are?
Yeah. They're just hilarious because it's like, see, they have all the privilege in the world, right? And when I'm saying privilege, I'm not saying they have a private car. I'm saying they have a private helicopter.
Right.
So, and like they're still, so nasty, so cruel to each other, just, messing up their own lives, but in such a funny way, that you have to know what happens next. It's like watching, waiting to watch a car crash. Plus, I think it just, again, and the second rule is people say, hey, don't talk about privilege too much. Like you're saying, make it more accessible.
Very touchy subject now with the rise of a lot of online activism as well.
Exactly.
You can't talk about that really.
Exactly. You can, but people are like, people don't want to see privilege. They're tired of it, right? Like there's this, people want to build, that's why people want to build new forms of currency.
Yeah.
Why crypto is a movement, Web3 is a movement, DAOs, NFTs, all of that. It's like this, it's sort of a form of rebellion, right, against privilege. So it's very interesting that this show that should have been so niche has become a global sensation. So yeah, that's one show. And then the second show is called White Lotus. Again, this is like a complete sleeper hit. This writer-director, HBO went to him in the middle of the pandemic and said, hey, write and shoot something super quickly and cheaply. Okay, so again, it was just like, oh, you have 3 months, you have almost no space, no actors, just make it happen. And he just wrote a show that was authentic to himself. So he was in Hawaii during the pandemic, and he was sitting on the beach and he was observing people around him. And he literally he just wrote a very small mini series, 6 episodes around a group of people who come to a resort, on vacation in Hawaii. Such a simple premise. You're like, oh, I've seen this 1,000 times. But then the way the series unfolds, what happens to these characters and their relationships, the way they interact with each other, what changes for them during this holiday, done so funnily and smartly and unexpectedly. It's just, that's why I tell my team, it's not about, people think, oh, it has to be about budget, it has to be about scale. We instantly talk about Mirzapur or Sacred Games, or Game of Thrones, which are really expensive, large scale, once in a lifetime shows.
Right. They are once in a lifetime shows.
But Fleabag or White Lotus, I mean, these are really small, cheap, easy to do shows. Like, I mean, right, like you can literally, like, you can film them, over like a few weeks.
Right.
So no excuses, basically. You can't make excuses. If you're not making something good, it's on you. Right. You can't say that, oh, I didn't have the budget for it.
Yeah. Budgets are no longer constraints, especially when people are out there shooting films with just their phones, no ring lights.
iPhones, exactly. Right. Exactly. We you could make an excuse 20 years ago. Now you can't.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the shows, have you watched Vinyl on HBO?
I've not. I've heard of it though.
Yeah, it's very, very good. It's one of those shows that I hold dear to my heart, even as someone who is an Indian and didn't exactly grow up around rock and roll, but I started to enjoy it as a 13 and 14. It's very sad that they didn't make season 2, which sort of brought to my mind a question I wanted to ask someone who works with OTT platforms. There are some fantastic shows that audiences love, that fans want to see as many seasons of as possible. Then there are some horrible shows that people don't like. I found that the horrible shows with like a standard template idea tend to have more seasons. The really good shows always have, lesser seasons. Is there a reason for that?
Like, what's an example of a really bad show?
For example, a really bad show is Animal Kingdom. Have you watched that on Netflix? It's about this family who are all thieves.
But I think, isn't Animal Kingdom, some of those shows, I think they're basically TV shows that have been licensed.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of, that's the thing. Yeah. A lot of what you see on these platforms, they're not originals. The platform has not commissioned them. And that's also, what I keep, like, a lot of the shows, they were basically just on TV, and they've just picked them up and they put on the platform and they've given them visibility. So that's another reason why TV writers get so angry. Because it's like, they say, hey, you guys are coming in and saying you're building a digital ecosystem, an OTT ecosystem, you're writing for a new audience. By the way, all the stuff I say, we're telling stories for a new India, where digital only, the audience is so different. You have to have new formats, new writers, this whole conversation, right? So I'm just telling you the flip side. The TV writers are like, dude, we've been doing this for like 20, 30, 40 years. Nothing's changed. You're just taking that same format. And basically what's changed is the programming has changed. So you used to have different buyers. It used to be, okay, there were a TV channel was making the decision, and then they used to program it, and you used to have to buy a cable to watch the same thing. The only difference is you've taken the same content and you just put it online, and now people can choose when to watch it.
Yeah.
So the business has changed, but the content hasn't.
So
So
that's
even
why there's a mixed bag of stuff that you see on Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix, or even look at like all the Indian shows, right? Hotstar, they've taken all the stuff, or Voot. I mean, they take all the stuff from their TV channels like Star or Colors, and they just put on their platform. And even if you see on the platform, you can see what's trending, what's doing well, right? Like we look at this all the time. What's doing really well on Hotstar is Anupama, for example, which is a TV series that they have on Star. So my mother-in-law is watching Anupama, on TV. It's just that I would, watch it online because I don't have a cable.
Do you think OTT platforms will completely replace cable or even DTH once most big channel providers like Hotstar start putting all their channels on the platform itself?
I think what's going to happen is these, I do think everything is going to come online, but I think you're going to see these Hotstar and Netflix and Amazon only doing programming. So there's going to be no difference between TV. Like, what was the difference in TV? It was you couldn't choose, right?
You couldn't pause.
Yeah, you couldn't pause, you couldn't rewind, you couldn't fast forward. Plus, you had to tune in. Someone else chose for you.
Yeah.
Right. Like it was like you want to watch Game of Thrones, you have to come at 8 p.m. and watch it between 8 and 9 p.m. on a Monday. Otherwise, you've missed it.
Right.
Right. I think we're going to see that also because I think we're going to see that online. Because I think people are getting really saturated with choice. They're getting really tired. And I also think, honestly, I think content loses value if it's just there for everyone to look at. Like, for example, we just, Brave New World, okay, this show that we just did, that's on Disney Plus. Okay. So if it's taken us, I would have loved actually to just put it out for a limited amount of time. Versus just put it on Disney Plus for people to see whenever. Because when you have a specific window, which is obviously what, theaters do with films.
Which is what Mubi does as well.
Yeah, what a movie does that or in films, right? Like that is what happens. You have a certain window. You have to go to the theater. You have to buy a ticket if you want to watch a movie. And that's what creates build-up. It's what creates excitement.
Right.
It's what creates value. Because if you can just see something at any time, I mean, that's why, when you're dating someone, it's more exciting than when you're married, right?
Right.
Like when you're dating someone, there's this, like, oh, when you're going to see them next, when you're married, they're right there. So it's the same thing, right? With content.
That's when you have to find things like inner peace.
Yeah, but whatever, you have to spice things up, right? So it's the same thing. It's the same thing with content. Like it has to, I feel like you need to build that excitement. Now I think today it's more about marketing. It's more about like, how do you do those drops?
Right.
Like it's not just about like, of course you have to have great content because people are smart. If you have the best marketing with poor content, I mean, you've seen this again and again now with, what different platforms are putting out.
Right.
Their marketing budgets cost the same as the actual content budget, but things tank. So it's not like having a good marketing budget means that things will work. But if you put out the best piece of content with no marketing, it is going to tank. So I feel like the game is as much about marketing as content.
I was very surprised to see how horribly AK versus AK did, considering the
amazing marketing,
multi-level marketing that they tried. Not multi-level, that sounds wrong. Multi-level marketing is another scam that's running on the internet nowadays, where you get people to it's like that whole thing. Have you watched that meme? Kal subah 9:30 baje yahan milna. No?
No.
Okay. No. I'll send it to you. It's really funny. But this guy basically gets people to enroll in his network marketing. Ek bande ko leke aao, aapko commission milti hai. Like a pyramid scheme. Anyway, so AK versus AK, I thought was interesting because I thought Netflix was trying to do something similar to what they did with that one episode of Black Mirror, Bandersnatch, where you could choose the consequences. Yeah. I enjoyed it because I was like, okay, there are these two big stars, Anurag Kashyap and Anil Kapoor. And now they're doing this kind of breaking the fourth wall thing where they're like, okay, we are going to be ourselves, but also play this kind of mystery. But I was surprised. I mean, despite all of it, why did it tank so badly? I mean, I'm just like, what do you think?
Very experimental, honestly. I honestly think that Netflix did it also. I think all platforms, they have an allocation, right? So they look at it on a portfolio basis. So some things are meant to be massy and commercial. Right. Some things are meant to be very locally rooted. Some things are meant to do well globally. Some things are just experimental. because you're testing an audience. And it's the same way Bandersnatch was experimental. They were testing an audience. I think AK versus AK, it was just an experimental bet that Netflix took to say that, hey, let's try a different format. And just maybe the audience wasn't ready for it, right?
Right.
I mean, this is like another conversation that people are constantly having around adult animation. So there's a big divide in, are people in India ready for adult animation? Because a lot of other countries, right, like Japan, South Korea, the US, France, adult animation is a huge genre. You just don't have that here. So someone needs to take a bet, right? Someone just needs to put money behind it and see if it works or not.
Have you watched Aapki Poojita?
Which one?
Aapki Poojita.
No, I've never even heard of that. What is that?
Okay, I'll definitely send this to you. This is the best adult animation I've watched. It's a bit dark and super funny. It's Indian. It's
who's made
it? So this is Bakar Max. Bakar Max is right. So Sumit Kumar, who runs that, is a friend of mine. He's also been on this podcast. I know BoJack Horseman is great, and I know Indians love BoJack Horseman on account of how real and how parody-centric its whole depiction of fame, being washed up, mental health is. But if you watch Aapki Poojita, it is so raw, so real, and it's darkly funny. I'll definitely send you a link.
Really?
That is a 6 or 7 minute animation. But the issue is, since it's very popular with all the dank, edgy kids or like anyone who has a sense of humor, it takes a lot of risks that I'm afraid if you show people in a 2-hour window is gonna cause people to call up the censor board or get pissed off.
Yeah. So interesting. But I mean, I have followed Bakar Max, love their work. See, they are what I'm saying. They have a unique voice.
Right. Yes.
That's what you need with creators. They're like exactly the sort of example I would have given there. They do what they know. And then the more they do that, the better they get.
Yeah.
And I love that. So I'll definitely check this out, and actually would love to be connected to them also.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what you just said, right, is like the other like huge challenge, right, that people are facing now, like what is allowed and what isn't. So it's almost like, the question is honestly, how much do you self-censor? Right? Like that's the balance. And it's a tricky one, right? Because I mean, if you're going to be a storyteller, then you have to see the main thing that you have to have is honesty. Right? Like if you're not authentic, if you're not honest, then the story is going to fail because people are really smart. Like people can tell, when you really have put yourself out there. And so I think that's what people are now also always debating, like what is it you can and cannot show.
Yeah, I think talking about adult animation, I think there is one movie, I've forgotten the name. It's by Gitanjali Rao, who is
Bombay Rose.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
that's unbelievable. I mean, that's like literally like a work of art.
I haven't watched it, but I've heard many good things about it.
Yeah. But so see that's another level of creation. Okay, so that's like there's stuff that you do commercially for theater, there's stuff that you do for platforms, and then there's stuff that you just do for art. Like I think this film, I might be wrong, but I think it's taken her 10 years.
Wow.
To make it. And so that's again the thing about running a creative business, right? Like, I mean, you can take a call that, hey, some things that you're just going to do for the art of it, and you're going to put that time and energy behind that thing. But then, I mean, if you're gonna like, you can only take one of those bets, right? Like you can't have multiple bets like that. So I think she really has basically put, I don't want to say a lifetime of work, but like a lot of things in her life have led up to that film. And then she is again, I find this very interesting, solo voice creators. Like I was telling you about Phoebe Waller-Bridge. There's also Issa Rae. There's Michaela Cole. So Issa Rae did Insecure.
Even Wes Anderson, for that matter.
Yeah, Wes Anderson, is he writer, director, producer?
He does everything. He's an author.
Everything. Oh, interesting. But he's not, and he's also sometimes in front of the camera, right? So
not really.
He does cameos, doesn't he?
Sometimes, yes.
He does cameo roles. So these guys though, like Issa Rae, Michaela Cole, they are the stars of their show. They are literally in front of the camera all the time while directing themselves, right? So that's like the same thing I was saying with Bhuvan Bam.
Right.
He's actually one of those solo voice creators, right? He's conceptualizing. Of course, in his series Dindora, there's a director, there is a producer. But because he's conceptualized it and then he's also the main face, you have that authenticity, honesty, uniqueness of voice, truth that I think makes these things work. So I mean, I don't even know what the question was. I just got excited because
there wasn't a question. You were just jamming, talking about.
This is like a big thing for me, So I mean, actually, if you through this podcast or whatever, you find these people that can be those voices, please think of me. Like I'm literally looking to back, creators like this, because not enough people in India get that support. Right. You basically need a producer. You have to have a producer that says, hey, I believe in you and I'm going to put the resources and time and team behind you to make it. So
you should tune in every week then, because I will have people on, and if you find someone, be like, "Ha, mere ko murga mil gaya," so then we'll make something happen for sure. One of the reasons why I really do enjoy doing this, and I've restarted it, is because when you talked about how your Stanford MBA asked you a question around what do you do when you're bored, like where do you have the most fun? All my fun memories have always been, I love doing research, I love reading and writing, but what I love even more is sitting with a bunch of people and making jokes and being able to tell stories and then filter or change that story in spontaneously, seeing reactions, seeing if I can add certain references that gets people to lean in, which is why I was like, it makes perfect sense to do a podcast, because I love sharing stories with others and sharing their stories and see wherever we can find common ground and then riff on that. So, which is I think wonderful, because it isn't a luxury or it isn't an opportunity that we could have had, say 3 years ago or 4 years ago or even 5 years ago. I would have to be an anchor on some kind of a TV show and then get a few moments of laughs here and there. And I'd be known as like, oh, you're flamboyant anchor, kuch bhi bol deta hai. But now it's just, your own show. So, yeah. Before we kind of turn things down and depart, are there any questions you have for me? One, and two, now that you're actively looking for talent, where can people find you? Where can they kind of reach out to you?
Yeah. The main question I have for you is this one, that, how are you finding talent and creators? And then also, can you send them my way? And for people, who are listening to this, so, if you want to find out more about Boundless Media and look at our portfolio and the stories we tell, you can go to our website, www.boundlessmedia.in. You can contact me on Twitter at Natasha Malpani. My DMs are open, which is literally how we just had this conversation.
Exactly.
And then also on our website, you can find our contact details of where to send us pitches, etc. But, one thing I will say, by the way, guys, when you're sending a producer pitch, it's not really enough to send like a 1 or 2 page idea. Like you need to send a deck. Like, that's what I'm saying. Anyone can have an idea. Sorry to break this to people, but anyone can have an idea. You have to put together a deck saying, hey, this is the story, this is the world, this is the characters, format, this is why me. Or even better, if you actually have some screenplay, it doesn't have to be the whole thing, but you need to show that you can write screenplay, because writing screenplay, writing scenes, writing dialogue is a totally different skill set from writing, in any different way, whether it's fiction,
like a blog post,
non-fiction, blogs, articles. See, every art has its own format.
Right.
So, just show us that you've spent some time, you've read other screenplays, you can write screenplay.
Yeah, I still get emails with saying, hey, I would like to apply for a job. So that is why I was looking for a writer for writing a lot of the stuff that I post. And I asked for 3 writing samples. And I think having that filter where you have like a pitch deck puts out all the lazy people and like only gets you the cream, which is something that people don't realize. I mean, I'm not a founder, etc., but I've had to learn this the hard way, because I would just say, I'm looking for a video editor, and I would just get anyone. But then you have to be specific. And in India, I think people don't recognize the value of having a personal website, a portfolio website, or work samples. which I think really makes you stand out for even people like you, if you're reading, because you only have like 3 or 4 or 5 seconds where your attention is right there. And if you don't like it on the first go, you're not going to look at it again, right? No one has the time. So it's very important that people have pitch decks and samples. Natasha, it's been a pleasure to have you on this podcast. I had a lot of fun riffing with you on many topics. I would certainly like to have you back on soon so we can talk about maybe the current OTT space with a bit more nuance and see, like, maybe even dissect certain projects and see what we find. But for now, people can follow you on Natasha Malpani Ospal on Twitter, and the various things that you recommended, we'll have them in the description. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, it's crazy that we ran out of time. I actually thought this conversation was going to be, we were going to talk about OTT. Oh, no, so I actually really like that, that we covered so many different topics, especially, I think some of the topics we covered, like, building culture and creative businesses, and, what does consistency look like for creators? These are things that we actually need to talk about more. So really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Likewise. It was a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you so much. Take care. Right.